Hi, this is Tom McGrath, editor of Philadelphia Magazine, and welcome to the final day of Philadelphia Magazine's ThinkFest. Our conversation in this session is about the future of work with Wil Reynolds, founder and director of innovation at Seer Interactive, and Asher Raphael, co-CEO of Power Home Remodeling. Thanks to our sponsors for this event, including our presenting sponsor, Bank of America, as well as St. Joseph's University, T0 Group, and Paperboy Media Group. If you missed the sessions earlier this week, I invite you to go to phillymag.com/thinkfest to check out all the videos there. Thanks very much for tuning in. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to our conversation about the future of work. I'm thrilled to have two great guests with us for this session. Wil Reynolds is the founder and director of innovation at Seer Interactive, and Asher Raphael is the co-CEO of Power Home Remodeling. These guys are both experts on work and workplace culture. Both of their companies have been recognized frequently as great places to work. So thrilled that you guys can be here. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having
us.
So obviously, where and the way many of us have been working has changed over the last 3 months. I'm sitting here in the Philly Mag offices this week for ThinkFest, but most of my time in the last 3 months has been spent at a fairly small desk in my house. So I'm curious with you guys, tell us a little bit about sort of how your companies have adapted to the pandemic and sort of where your people are working and how that's worked out for you. Let me start with you, Wil.
Sure. For us, the transition wasn't actually that difficult. We have allowed people to desk share in both of our offices in Philly and San Diego for the last 3 years. So we've always had some people who have kind of worked sometime at home, sometime in the office, if that's what worked best for them and their family setup. I also have always said I'm kind of addicted to talent. And when you're addicted to talent, you want to just work and surround yourself with smart people wherever they may live. So once I recognized that about myself, we started hiring remote workers probably about 4 years ago. There were alumni of ours who had just kind of moved on, and I just missed working with them. So I started bringing back alumni, people that I just loved working with. And that's when our president, Crystal, was like, hey, let's make this a real thing. So we were set up pretty well infrastructure-wise to be able to handle people moving from place to place. It's just part of our ethos to have the best people we can get wherever they may be.
Great. How about you guys?
Well, addicted to talent is a great line that I'm stealing officially. My situation was pretty different than Wil's. Most of the majority of our business are customer facing, where we're doing work in people's homes and meeting with them in their homes in close quarters, which meant that we had to basically shut down our whole business, or the vast majority of it for health and safety reasons. And the planning of it was pretty difficult. When we decided to stop major work operations, we were committed to keeping payroll going and no layoffs. So we got our financial house in order, figured out where could we get access to capital. All the partners stopped taking salaries, and then the CARES Act came out, and which was this unprecedented amount of money. And the furlough opportunities were better than what we could provide. So we ended up having to furlough 2,215 employees, which was something I'd never imagined doing. Obviously we kept their benefits going in the short term though. And then the remaining about 350 employees, they've all been working virtually. So we're in 16 different major markets, but all of our offices have been closed.
Gotcha. Wil, let me go back to you. And you said you already basically had some of the infrastructure set up and the culture set up to make remote work for you. Just be a little bit more specific about some of the things that you guys had already been doing and what makes that work for you guys.
Sure. So everybody was laptops. I mean, it's funny. I talked to some companies and people had desktops at their old companies, right? They didn't always have laptops. So everybody was laptop driven. We have stipends already in place for all of our remote team members to set up their offices however they want. So we already had the infrastructure in place. When people were like, oh, I need this, it's like, oh, great, we already provide that, right? So there were so many things that we had done over the years. We already had Zooms. We already had all the technology acquired, which just made it very easy for us because we've always had different members of our teams that were remote, and we've always thought of how do we try to make ourselves as inclusive of those folks as possible so that they don't feel like they're off on an island somewhere. So it's always just been, it's been like 3 or 4 years, so it's not even like a thing to us, because it's just how we've been working for so long. So it wasn't really that much of a shift from having the technology to continue your job. I definitely recognize that working from home brings a whole nother set of interesting challenges and difficulties. People have different Wi-Fi setups. Some people have better routers than others. Some people have roommates who play Xbox when they need to be on a Zoom call. So, the thing that we also do is we just pulsed our team for the first time and asked them like 40 different questions about their work from home setups. So now what we're able to do is slice and dice that data by role type, by location, and those things to kind of see like where are we seeing people struggling, and then we're just going to keep pulsing people on a regular basis so we can see if the things that we're doing are actually improving the outcomes for people who are working from home.
Asher, guys, and the folks that are working remotely, how has that worked out for you?
It's been a challenge for us, especially, as I just mentioned, having to furlough the majority of our workforce. I didn't know what a furlough was. I've become a acute student of it in a short amount of time, where people for the first time, they didn't have to check in for anything. They didn't have to engage, and that strikes at a chord for us because we're a culture first type of business that focuses on engagement. So we came up with an engagement strategy pretty early on, and focused first on early engagement, meaning like let's not worry about I don't want to have to deal with the problem of getting people to re-engage. So we came up with a programming schedule, like a weekly programming schedule right away. And what we had to do is figure out, if people were going to have the opportunity to choose to check in, we have to create content that they wanted to be a part of, that they were interested in, but at the same time, things that were also like positive, like the vacuum of time typically doesn't get filled with things that are positive and that we felt that our people needed us during this time more than ever. So we had a weekly speaker series. We brought in addiction specialists, therapists to talk about not only mental health, but also couples counseling, because our people for the first time, their homes were now their offices. They were their gyms. They're homeschooling their kids because schools are closed, so they're teachers. But also some fun things. Like we put together something we call Power's Got Talent, which is it was like an America's Got Talent plus The Voice type of thing, and really high production value. And luckily we have an internal creative team that was able to put some amazing product together that showcased the talents of thousands of our people throughout the country. And it was like must-see TV. It was a really amazing opportunity to create a shared experience for people in an otherwise really isolating time. That was a big success for us, finding ways to keep our people engaged with positive things.
Asher, let me stick with you for a second, because I'm curious, as we sort of move back very, very slowly to first a new normal, maybe eventually back to normal. I'm curious what you think, are there going to be any permanent changes, things that you've learned just in the last 3 months from what we've gone?
So I think that, I'd answer that in kind of two different ways. One is that I do think that there's going to be long-term changes to how people are working in the country, because I think that there was already a move in that direction. I think that it was like two prongs. One is that you hear from a lot of young people, specifically a lot of millennials, that they want the freedom to work where they want to work, be able to work from home, and it's also cost effective, right? Having less space for business owners. That being said, although I do think there's going to be a change in work culture throughout the country, I'm not planning any for my own business personally. I think that what makes work great are the people that we get to do it with and the relationships that get formed while problem solving. And that for most people's jobs, regardless of industry, there are really exciting things we get to work on and things that are deeply meaningful, but there's also a lot of blocking and tackling. And if you're not doing that with people that you care about, it's just work. You know what I mean? And I think, and this is counter to what most people say and believe, right? In today's work environment, but I think the role of a CEO is supposed to be, it's not just like you're the chief executive officer. You're supposed to be like the chief vision officer, and not just respond to what people say that they want, and instead, create an environment that if they trust you and they follow you, that they end up happier and healthier people. And I think that happens when people are engaged with one another. And I think part of the problem is that there isn't a lot of focus on creating office culture where, if people aren't happy with where they're working, if they're not in environments that bring out the best in them, then they would prefer to work from home. So yeah, the long answer to both. I think that there is going to be this change in where and how people are working, but inside of my own community, I'm not planning on any.
Well, in terms of you guys, since you were sort of already ahead of the curve on this, I'm wondering if you see, first of all, any permanent changes in that direction, and then also just to pick up on the point Asher just made about maintaining culture, I think, while you're working remotely, and just talk a bit about how you guys do that as well.
Sure. It's funny. I try to keep life simple, and one of the things that I did early on is we're just a high trust organization, and I think for me, when it comes down to making tough decisions, we just defaulted to trusting our team. So we started doing unlimited vacations because one of our team members, like this when we were like 6 people, we're now like 200. This had to be at least 12 years ago. One of our team members, she had used up all her vacation days, and her parents were going to China for some trip. And all I could think of is all that ass you've been kicking for this company, and I'm gonna tell you that you can't go on this thing, which means your parents are going to be sending pictures and doing things, and you're just going to be like, I couldn't go, sorry. And then I'm the reason why that happened. And that was when we were like 6 employees. So I told Bonnie, I was like, Bonnie, just like go, man, we'll figure it out. So I think when you work in a high trust organization, it's like the grease in the wheels. So therefore, everything is just easier when you tell people, we start off just trusting you're going to do your job great. Culture is hard as you, for me, as you expand. I mean, when I first started Seer, I used to tell people like Bonnie that we would never get over 10 people. I just never dreamed of having a big company, never was my vision. I was always I was a teacher. I was trained as a teacher. So I always like working with people very hands-on and getting to know them very well. So it's even been a struggle for me to maintain those kind of bonds, which is why I got a stack of thank you cards on my desk. Like I've already written 10 thank you cards to individual employees today. And then I stuff another thank you card with a pre-stamped envelope in it. So then they have to send it to somebody else. And it's just like little things like that you can do to try to tell people that you still matter. Just because I can't stop by your desk doesn't mean I don't still think about you, And I think a lot of times it's the small things that you can do to show people that you still care, which helps them to feel like they're connected and part of the culture. And I just love the challenge of saying, how do we, we're a major volunteer culture. When you're remote, that's really hard to figure out. And we've struggled with how do we take this concept of how we volunteer together and try to do something with our remote team members in that way. And we've struggled with it, but it's a struggle worth figuring out. I definitely always say I wasn't put on this planet to solve easy problems. So I look forward to someday figuring out how do you kind of take a high volunteer culture and make that happen in a place where you have so many people that are remote.
Asher, you mentioned millennials before, and I know you have a really significant portion of your workforce are millennials. I'm curious, what are some specific things that they want differently than previous generations wanted when it comes to work and workplace and office culture?
So that's a really good question. I think the reputation of how different this millennial generation is than the ones that came before is misguided. I think that the things that they want are the same that people have wanted since the beginning of time. Like as human beings, we evolve through our ability to cooperate and to exist in a community, and there is a longing to be part of something that is bigger than yourself. And the reputation that this generation is so individualistic, I think is short-sighted. I think that it is true that they're less likely to affiliate with large groups. They're less likely to affiliate with a religious institution, a political party. They have distrust in corporate America, and I think that's for good reason. I think with the information age is what they want is something that is worthy of their time and sacrifice. And what I find is that if you can create an environment where people feel like their values are aligned with yours and they feel that they're being promoted and cared for, that they're more committed to an organization than anything else, because there is this kind of longing for it. And the challenge for us, it's like Will said, he's not born to solve simple problems. It is a challenge to create an organization that's worthy of the sacrifice that we ask of them. But if you do that and you put them first, and as leaders and as an organization, you feel like your job is to work for them, not the other way around. The level of cooperation and commitment that you can get is substantial.
Well, I'm curious about your experience working with millennials. I don't know what percentage of your team are millennials, but just talk about that issue for a moment.
It's funny, I don't know either. I know we have a lot of people, and I don't even know where you draw the line on millennials these days. It's to be honest with you, it doesn't even register to me. I am a very inclusive kind of guy, so I don't even try to divide my team members up into these groups. I think that's part of the problem, right? The one thing I will say is it reminds me of what I saw from Trevor Noah around the social contract. And I think what has happened is in the information age, which Asher was mentioning earlier, companies are getting exposed for being exactly who they are, right? And I think that that's very disheartening to people. They're now learning that companies are driven by certain things that they're saying one thing on one hand, and then they're doing something completely different on the other. So I think what I think I want to do is I want to work with people who are attracted to authenticity in their executive team, right? Like, you may not like what I'm saying or doing, but you know that you can trust that that's where my head and my heart is, and that I'm not going to be telling you something to try to, how am I going to play to the millennials? I don't care. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to build a company that I believe in, and I'm going to do things that I believe in, and I'm going to let those chips fall where they may, always being open to hearing people's feedback. But when this whole thing went down with COVID, we looked at ourselves, and because we were still open, Asher, it's hard to hear about how many people you had to furlough, bro. That's just hard to even hear. But for us, we weren't in that position, and we saw the government kind of not really getting their act together. So we opened up a $150,000 fund for anybody in the company. If their spouse, mom, dad, or sibling was like let go or laid off, we were like, okay, at $15 an hour, 40-hour a week, times 2 weeks, cover the taxes, $1,500. And we'll say, we'll figure out the legal crap later and the financial crap later. And I hope that as a company, millennial or not, that leading with, when we got it, we're sharing it. When we're in the position to help, that I hope that those things resonate with all my team members, regardless of what generation they fit in, about what kind of company we are and what we're trying to do. And, I get that people sometimes can be skeptical. And they have the right to be skeptical about corporate actions. And I'm not going to try to convince them that that is not a thing that was purely driven from us trying to be the best company we could be. But I'll tell you, man, when you get a card from somebody's parents telling you that you helped to save their mortgage that month, it's telling you you're doing something right,
That's great.
Yeah, it's great to get those thank you notes in addition to sending them, Will.
Actually, I'll show it to you. It's crazy. Here's my box of thank you notes from team members and parents. They just fall out over the last 6 years. And every so often I pull one out and I read one. I get them from my alumni. I get them from people's parents or team members, but it was leading by example. On every floor of our office, we have a set of stamps and a carousel full of thank you cards. So in this COVID world, I had to make sure when I wrote a thank you card that I put another blank one inside so I could keep that kind of momentum going, So I think we're all trying to do the best we can in this world to replicate our culture the best that we can.
Let me shift the subject here a little bit, guys. I want to talk about, obviously the other big thing that has occurred in 2020 are the protests of recent weeks and this acute and necessary focus on issues of racial justice and social justice. And I'm curious about whether you guys think this is going to have any impact on the workplace and work. And Asher, let me just sort of start with you in terms of just your overall thoughts about that question.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I'm glad that we're going to get some time to talk about it. Addressing these issues, luckily, wasn't something that was new for my organization. In 2017, we started a cultural diversity and inclusion initiative, and have been speaking to these issues and running towards the fire as opposed to kind of being pulled towards the fire feet. And in 2017, in our first summit, we talked about the idea of Black Lives Matter, and that there should be nothing controversial about that idea. We've spoken publicly about privilege in America, white privilege and male privilege and heterosexual privilege, and have dealt with these issues head on. But these recent events have been difficult. It's like these are scabs that seem to never heal in our country, and our own community inside Power has been really shaken by it. And to be totally transparent, there was some fractures inside our organization, specifically our African American community inside our walls were feeling extremely upset, and they were also upset internally, meaning they were upset at some of the silence that was going on, some of the silence that was happening from the organization, from management, and I think most importantly from their white colleagues that they considered close friends. And because we were used to this conversation, the way that we decided to handle it was, as always, just a direct dialogue. And I put together a committee of some African American leadership stakeholders in the organization and put together an agenda for it. We had over 800 unique viewers from inside the organization, and talked about the topics that they thought were most important. African Americans not feeling supported, the idea of building off of what the idea of what allyship really is, and that that to be an ally can't happen when it's convenient. You have to really be willing to lose something to be an ally. You have to be willing to sacrifice and feel pain. We had some live Q&As, and the result were, today I think that although there was some moments of fracture, we're way stronger than we've ever been. The corporate dialogue has worked into some regional organized dialogues, and there's just a new level of support than we'd ever seen before. So it's like everything else. I think really, really important things come from hard moments, and this has been a really hard one that has affected people in a genuine way. But I'm really happy with what we've done with it. We say a lot what we can't help. The things that happen to us are not always in our control, but the way that we react to them are. And I'm really, really proud of how our organization has reacted to it, but also I think how the country is reacting.
Well, I'm curious what your experience has been like in the last couple of weeks, both personally and also as the leader of a business.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I feel like every day I'm learning more about myself. I've been to both of the protests in Philly so far. And, one of the things that's really interesting to me is my team members. So we struggle with finding diverse talent, just like every other technology company, right? Just because your CEO is Black and the guy that's over most of your revenue is also Black. So at the executive level, we are super diverse. And that doesn't always trickle down. So we struggle like everybody else. And I think a lot of times people just assume that oh, you're CEO, you're Black, you must have this diversity thing figured out. It's like, nope, we're struggling just like you. But my team was a little hard on my executive team about the fact that we weren't saying enough, and one of my executives was like, well, think about the fact that our CEO is Black. Like, he doesn't really need to go out there and justify that his life matters, which is a very different dialogue when your CEO is Black. Like, oh, so I'm going to go out to the world and say, hey, everybody, my life, me too, I matter. Like, it's like, so he's like, this one executive was like, think about it through that lens, because the team was definitely like, yo, like, we know that these are topics you care about, so why aren't we seeing the company? And the other thing I think, to be honest with you, is Black squares is too easy. Like, that doesn't mean you're changing anything. So what I had to do is remind the team that, the reason why I founded this company was in large part due to the fact that I could not volunteer when I wanted to at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I had said to my boss at the time, I said, can I work through my lunch on Wednesdays so I can ultimately get to CHOP on time for my volunteer assignment? And she said that was not possible, so I quit and started Seer. So I've reminded my team that our company was founded on the fact that we are going to impact our communities, and that has been since August 1st of 2002. And it's like every team member every month that volunteer, actually 2 team members every month that volunteer the most hours, they get $500 donated in their name to those organizations. Every new client we sign gets a I think it's a $500 gift certificate to donate somewhere within their communities. At every holiday, we give our clients just gift cards so they can donate within their communities. And we have spent almost 10,000 hours of volunteer time within our communities. So I was reminding our team members that like we've already had people volunteer and gave people time off during work to go out to protests and whatnot well before George Floyd happened and the murder of George Floyd happened. So I had to almost remind the team that we don't need to make statements because we've been making them with our feet, our hands, our minds, and our hearts and our wallets since August 1st of 2002. The other thing I think it's interesting being a Black CEO is like, I was raised to expect this from the world. So it was so surprising to watch people so shook up. I'm like, Trayvon, Tamir Rice, like a 12-year-old gets shot by a cop and he's walking the streets free as you and I are today. So it's like, yeah, this is the world. So it's funny, like for me, I think one of the most interesting things that I'm trying to understand better is because I'm not white. It's like how my mother just raised me to expect the world to be like this. We have an ATM in front of our office. I watched a video of a bunch of guys try to break it open and take all the money out. The next morning I wake up, I go down there with my broom to sweep up the parts and I send them to Wells Fargo being like, hey, I got parts of your ATM upstairs and I'm going to sweep this thing up. And of course I think I'm a Black guy pulling on an ATM, trying to clean it up. So of course I brought down my business card and whatnot so I could show that I run the company that's in the whole building, right? But to me, that's just normal. It might be sad for some people to realize that, and it's a shame that the world's that way, but that's just the world. So I'm also having to learn how to deal with people dealing with this for the first time, because my mom started these conversations with me when I was 8.
Tom, do you mind? Could I add on one thing?
Absolutely, please. Yes.
You had asked before about the difference between millennials in the workforce versus non-millennials. As it relates to this topic, I do think that there is a difference. I had a conversation with I'm 40. I had a conversation with a team member of mine that works out of our Atlanta office, who's the same age, and he made a really interesting comment. He's African American remodeling consultant for us, and leader, veteran of the business and of the country. And he brought up, he's like, our generation is the first generation to have only known civil rights. It was like where the whole country had civil rights, and we were just like the expectations weren't necessarily there because it was the first generation. Where now this next generation, because it's the second generation, I think that they're looking around the country and saying, what is this? Like, we're not okay with this. And, and they are offended in a different type of way. And I think that is moving the pendulum in a way that is going to be lasting.
Agreed.
I'm wondering whether, sorry to interrupt there. I'm wondering whether we feel like there's a shift happening with companies and corporations, in that I feel like the sort of old norm here was that a corporation just kept silent on things. That the idea was that a corporation shouldn't do anything, quote, controversial. And I'm putting that in air quotes because there shouldn't be anything controversial about saying Black Lives Matter. But I'm wondering whether we're feeling a shift in that the expectations have changed, that corporations need to be speaking out more clearly, both, whether it's performative with a black square or whether that is simply the expectation from the employees. And Asher, back to your point about wanting to belong to something that's larger than themselves. And I wonder if you guys think there's a shift happening right here.
I certainly do. And I don't think that this is the beginning of it. I think that there has been a shift where both on the consumer facing side, people care more about the values of the businesses that they decide to do business with. And on the employment side, in a real way, people care about not just how much they make, not just what their job qualifications are or their job responsibilities, but the values of the organization. So I think companies have to speak to it. And we see it certainly in all of the advertising that we're bombarded with day in and day out. And I think what is taking time to catch up with that is what people really look for is authenticity. You can say something controversial if it is aligned with your values and they want to know where you stand. And that's what I think Wil was saying before, is that like other companies that were scrambling to figure out, I don't know what to say about this because I don't know what we actually feel about it yet. where stronger brands have a very clear identity, and it's not controversial if it is aligned with your values.
So it feels like to me like you guys have been navigating the difficult waters of 2020 fairly well. I'm curious if you have any advice for other CEOs and other business leaders out there, things that you sort of, try and stick to when you're navigating your own companies and own workplace cultures.
I try not to give too much advice. I try to do more listening. But something that struck me about what Wil said is maybe in three different answers. I heard him use the word trust, and I think that is I think trust is the foundation of a strong culture. Is that people they don't have to always think that you're right. They don't always have to agree with you. They have to trust you, right? And they have to trust that they're safer because they are part of your community. And I think a really big part of that starts with, each of us have to sacrifice when we're part of a community. We have to be willing to sacrifice ourselves for the greater good. And in order to get people to do that, they're going to look to the left and to the right of them. But the starting point has to start with you as the leader. So if I was going to talk to another CEO, I'd say, you have to go first. You have to be the first one through the wall. And coming out of COVID, something that we're trying to do is, when we suspended business operations on our town halls, we have every week. One thing that we've said is that we will always put your safety. That will be the number one priority of the business, and we will get back to business as quickly as we can so that you can start earning money. But we will never ask you to do something we wouldn't do ourselves. And the reason I'm calling in from Georgia right now is as we're slowly opening up offices throughout the country, I'm going to each one and doing all of the frontline jobs. To ensure people that knows, listen, I'm not going to ask your husband, your wife, to do something I wouldn't do myself. And people are watching, especially in these moments.
Wil, any advice that you want to share or?
No, it's funny, Ash, man, I love you, man. Cause I'm the same way. I'm I don't give advice. I think I don't broadly give advice because I don't know people's situation. I think that's how we get tripped up. The only thing I would say is, as the kids say today, keep it real. It's my biggest fear is people are doing things today that aren't truly in their hearts. It's what Asher's saying. It's not authentic. When the Redskins posted a black square, it was for real? Really? Really, you got the power to change the thing that you're trying. So for me, to be honest with you, I am very skeptical of business in general, even as somebody who runs one. So I tell everybody, don't listen to anything your CEO says today. Nothing. Take the email, auto forward it to come back a year from now, and see what's actually different in your organization. And I would say that I'm really grateful. For this moment, because I think it's waking up a whole bunch of people. So I'm trying to take the best that I can out of it. The challenge that I've been giving people is I always say, pick up your phone, right? Pick up your phone, scroll through. Do you have a young black person in your phone that you could call right now to check in on? And I always say, don't call me because I'm good. I'm privileged as well, right? Don't make me your checkbox black friend. Because for me, when I felt like I had nowhere to turn, I picked up my phone and I called 3 kids who I had met with over the years from HopeWorks in Camden. And because we volunteer and we bring them in here for mentorship and interview training and things like that. So I picked up the phone and called them. And I actually helped one of them to get a project this week on a side project to help them kind of get some money on the table. So my challenge to folks is don't ask your CEOs to go post something on social media. It's see if they can pick up their phones and say, do you have somebody to call in an organization that you might be able to say, hey, you got more good things going on in your life. Don't get caught up in what's going on out there. And if not, that's okay. But then it's what are you going to do over the next year so that next year, because there will be another black man killed by the cops again, are you going to have somebody in your phone to call to check in on? So it's okay that you don't have somebody today potentially, but don't you want somebody to call in a year from now to check in on? And that's been my challenge to folks. There's too many great organizations in our city. HopeWorks, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Police Athletic Organization. There's too many organizations that people could put their money where their mouth is if they really care about this moment, to get involved in the lives of actual Black youth. Posting stuff on social media means nothing to me because it's never saved a Black life. You got to be able to be close to the people that you say you care about their lives. The way to be close to somebody is to actually know them, be able to pick up your phone and contact them and remind them that they've got a great future ahead of themselves and that they should not get involved in whatever might be going on that might be negative, or that you're there to support them and listen to them and hear them out. And for me, when I said that to one of the kids who I called from HopeWorks, she challenged me and she said, well, Will, I haven't heard from you in a while. I'm like, that's right. She's like, you meet with all of us the one time. You've probably met with hundreds of us, but how many of us have you called a second time? And then I said, I'm going to call 3 more people this week. And then she and I are working together to build a certification program to help Black kids and brown kids and white kids too in our city. I mean, we're a mostly brown city, to get access to people like our organization to help them get careers in our industry. So it's like, those are the actions that I want to, the kinds of actions I want to see people take. So it's not just a bunch of hot air about Black Lives Matter. It's like, you can say it, show it.
It's a really powerful note to end on. Will, thank you very much for your time. Asher, thank you very much for your time. Thanks to our audience for tuning in.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
And a tiny word with so much power. And is realizing we become stronger and better with each new experience. That true success requires constant learning, growing, exploring, and adding in all aspects of life. At St. Joseph's University, we are a community built on and. We're up for anything. Looking for new boundaries to test, new majors and programs to combine, new careers to start, new problems to solve, so that we succeed again and again and again. We have passion and purpose. We are strong and resilient, revolutionary and timeless, crimson and gray. We are St. Joseph's University. Discover your and at sju.edu.